Welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White. This is Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you for joining me. This is From the Hip number 3, and I have a few things I would like to discuss in this episode. Mostly, it comes down to the writing, and I think Dane from Dane Reads, I hired him to edit my novel, The Haunted Country, and he did a marvelous job. There's a lot of edits that I still have to go through, a lot of them. I am making progress in that, but I want to give an update in case he's watching that, the book is still planning on coming out. But I ran into a financial situation in regards to putting out that book, which has nothing to do with Dane. I highly recommend hiring Dane if you have a novel that you want to publish. I'll put his channel down below, and you can go and maybe talk to him there. If you have a novel, like I said, that you want edited, he's very good. But yeah, this has nothing to do with that. This actually has more to do with certain other things that happened in real life, and the money that I had saved for the book cover, it's not gone, but it's almost gone. Actually, it's not even almost gone. I got about half of it, but I need to save the other half, and so I'm thinking of waiting until 2021, early 2021 for the release, because that'll give me time to finish up the edits and to get the book cover done the way I want it. And I have a book designer in mind, and this is why I'm saving up like a fair amount of money for it, because I really love this book designer's work, and I really want her to do my book design. I have a sort of vision for the cover that I think she would she would knock it out of the park. She pretty much does only horror book covers, and so that's something I really want to look into. I'm hoping that, I think she pretty much accepts or doesn't accept work, so I haven't approached her yet because, like I said, I don't have the money yet. I want to make sure that I do have the money before I go there, and so I'm really looking forward to working with her, so long as she takes it on. If not, there's a couple other really good book designers in the horror field that I want to approach if she doesn't want to for whatever reason. I'm not going to get into any names just yet because I want to wait until the thing's done and ready to come out. But I'm really looking forward to the second release of The Haunted Country. And I'm moving on. I am actually working on something else that's taking me forever because I'm handwriting it. I've come across authors during my Darkness Dwells podcast adventure where I talked with writers. Timothy Wagner is a horror writer who writes with, he writes it out in a notebook, his novels, and he writes them out in a notebook for the most part first. And I hate handwriting. I hate writing with my hand because my wrist will cramp up really easily, and I just can't stand doing it for that reason. But I decided, because I generally stop writing around, I usually make it, there's no average actually, but I do have trouble finishing projects, and the biggest reason for that is I think what's happening is my inner editor is collecting, he's collecting a list of things that I'm doing wrong in the first draft. And this inner editor, he's a grumpy son of a bitch, and he doesn't like it, and pretty soon he's gonna just put a halt to the whole thing. And so I have a bunch of novels that are unfinished, and I want to go back to them. I think to finish the novel, to get the ending, I pretty much know how they end, but I stopped because I ran into a few problems that my inner editor was like, you know what, this problem's been going throughout the whole novel. You just need to stop. And I'm like, I know what I need to do is to stop listening to you inner editor, until it's time to actually edit the thing. So to get back to my point on the handwriting, I've been writing a new piece. I'm hoping it'll be novella length. Actually, I think it already is at the very bottom of novella length. Maybe. But it's a piece of weird fiction. I like the handwriting because it shuts the inner editor up. It's almost as though the inner editor is like, okay, this is handwritten, so it's gonna be pretty much garbage. I can make suggestions here and there, but there's gonna be mistakes. Because you do make a lot of mistakes when you write with your hand. I think the reason why your inner editor bugs you so much when you're typing is because of that damn backspace button. It knows that you can use that backspace button. It also knows you can go back to previous documents and change things. I guess I kind of sound like a crazy person talking about my inner editor as an actual person. But it's almost as though they are a real person, and they're ruthless. It can really bug your imposter syndrome and lack of confidence. Listening to Stephen Graham Jones on a podcast, and they're ruthless. It can really bug your imposter syndrome and lack of confidence. Listening to Stephen Graham Jones on a podcast, he was saying that he listens to music to shut up his inner editor when he's writing, and that doesn't work for me. I've tried the music, and it doesn't. It might shut up the inner editor while you're working, but it doesn't shut the inner editor up, between writing sessions. So, but yeah, I'm writing something now that is actually pretty interesting to me. And there's actually another thing here. Same with reading books, where if I'm reading a book now and I DNF it because it's just not for now, and then I pick it up later and it's the best thing in the world, the best thing I've ever read. But I find that I'll often false start a story, and I hate it. I hate what I'm writing because it's garbage. And yes, a lot of that's the inner editor, but what I'm getting at is even when I read through what I've written, I'm like, this is something I wouldn't want to read myself. It's not good. And then I'll drop the story, and then a couple of years later, I'll go back to it and rewrite it completely different. And a revelation happened to me recently where I realized that I've been doing this the whole damn time. My short story that Richard from Are You Into Horror, The Serpent's Son, he really liked that story. And that is the first example that I can remember of this happening. I wrote a short story called, it wasn't called The Serpent's Son, it was called Promenade Babies. It had the same named character, Wendy, but it had a different monster in it. And it was a very different story. And I had it critiqued on a critique site. The name escapes me right now. It was really Critters. I don't know if anyone out there has used Critters, but I used to love Critters. And people said, this isn't scary. You got dolphin-like creatures that aren't scary, and it doesn't work. And so I was like, okay, I agreed, honestly. It was pretty much a story I myself wouldn't like if I came across it in the wild. And so I put it down, and about a year or two later, I rewrote it with the same characters, the same idea behind the main character, Wendy, and it came out as something absolutely different. And that was The Serpent's Son. And I kind of did it with my novel, The Haunted Country, because there's a short story called Surviving the Fittest, sorry. And I ended up expanding that into a novel, and that's The Haunted Country. And although I like the short story, because I kept it, and I had it published, and I also put it in my collection, Isolation. Yeah, I didn't cancel it. I obviously liked it, but I didn't. Where was I going? Don't you hate that? But yeah, that is another example. I did expand on it, and I made it better, I think. I did like the short story, but it's not as good as the novel, in my opinion. Now, not everyone's going to like the novel either. It's really nasty. And the reason why not everyone's going to like the novel is because they're there's trigger warnings, and there's trigger warnings for this in my collection as well, Isolation, for sexual assault on children. And this has been called out on me in Amazon reviews, and I got one recently where well, let me backtrack a bit. I got a really bad review for Isolation when it first came out, way back like 6 years ago, and actually I think it's 8. But anyways, where they said that the reviewer said they were going to report me because of all the terrible things that happened in the book to kids, and I freaked out. I remember I didn't comment on, because even back then it was bad. It was a bad idea to do that, to comment on a bad review. But other people did, and they're like, "This is horror. Bad things happen to people in real life, and that's, you know, sort of the point, right?" And I did complain to Amazon saying, "You gotta take this down." It makes me look bad. I don't know if it actually ever helped with sales or not, but... And anyways, getting back to my point, I got another one recently saying, or claiming that I used the sexual assault situations as for shock value, and I can't disagree more. Of course, when you're a horror writer, you definitely want to not necessarily shock your audience, but you want to write about bad things. And I think when people automatically assume that they know the author because of the short story or the stories they're reading from the author, that's a mistake. It's an easy mistake to make, because I do it all the time too. I'm like, this person is fucked up. But you don't know anything about the person. You don't know why they approached writing the story with this content in it. For all you know, somebody who's writing about sexual assault could be a sexual assault survivor, and they're trying to work through their shit. And, you know, so I think people need to separate the author from the work a bit more, instead of just assuming that because they write about horrible things that they are themselves a horrible person. And I'm kind of tired of that. But I've also made a promise to myself that I'm no longer going to write about sexual assault in my stories, because I'm kind of past that. And I just don't want to... I just don't want to deal with that anymore. I'm more concerned with relationships. And, you know, relationships have always been a really big part of my fiction anyway. But I sort of strayed away from a point in regards to The Haunted Country, that The Haunted Country has trigger warnings for sexual assault in it, especially at the end. I don't actually ever explicitly write sex scenes or like rape scenes or anything like that. I always imply it, because I've never enjoyed reading those types of scenes myself. So, or yeah, reading them, but so I definitely don't want to write them. Never have. You know, what's funny is I put this on my list to talk about that bad review, but there was just too much of a segue. I was going to scratch it off. I was going to be, you know what, I'm just not going to bother. But it bothers me because of the whole "you think you know me" thing, because I wrote a story about terrible things, when you don't know the reason why I wrote about them. And to be honest with you, I didn't know why those things crept into my fiction back then either. It just kind of happened, and it felt right, and so I went with it. And like I said, like, nobody knows except me why I wrote those things, and I'll tell you right now, it wasn't for shock value. I was trying to speak about a truth, and truth as I know it. And so I guess I don't know if this is the right platform to explain yourself to a bad review or not, but I felt I had to get that off my chest. Now, you're allowed to not like my books or the stories I write, of course. I'm good with that. I just don't like it when you come at me, the author, because you don't know me. And unless, of course, you watch my videos. If you watch my videos here on YouTube, then you might have an idea of the type of person I am. Because I did an assumptions video about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, And everyone who watches my video seems to know me. I guess I'm pretty transparent. I don't know. But yeah, I think horror writers get shit on a lot because they write about the unknown. And I think that has to stop. There's other reasons why people write about the unknown or the the terrible things that happen in real life. But yet, crime fiction writers don't get that same. They write about awful things too, happening to people, and people doing awful things to other people, and they don't really get that. This writer has to be a horrible person. They don't get that hanging over their heads. So, going into what I've been reading lately, now that I've done my little writing discussion and writing update, I finally got to Creature by Hunter Shea, and I'm about 2/3 of the way through, and man, this book is absolutely blowing me out of the water. I absolutely love this book. It's incredible. I decided to go, even though I have the physical book here, and I thought I had the ebook, but I don't. I decided to go with the audiobook, and I'm really glad I did. Hunter Shea really translates into vocal. His stories, you can read them out loud, and they're very easy to follow along. And the narrator for this book, I can't remember the narrator's name right now, but he's not the greatest narrator in the world, but he does do a very good job with this story, I think. I found a few instances where he pronounced fairly common words wrong, but that's neither here nor there, really. It doesn't bother me like it bothers some people. But he does a very good job at narrating, and the story itself is very good. It's very, very heavy on two different autoimmune diseases. One is lupus, and the other one I can't remember it. I don't think it says here on the back, but this the main character, Kate Woodson, she has two autoimmune diseases, and it's pretty much ruined her life. And the two, her husband and her, decide to go to a cabin for the summer to try to escape things before she has to go and get more medical work done, because the medicine that she's taking to fight these conditions are worse than the conditions themselves. I can't imagine living like that. It's a horror story without any creatures involved, if that makes any sense. But there is a creature in this, and it's kind of interesting as to what that creature might be. So I highly recommend this so far. It's a lot more in depth in character than I thought it would be. Hunter Shea really draws these out, and from my understanding, Hunter Shea is writing this from personal experience because his own wife either had or has these conditions or similar conditions. I'm not entirely sure. I might look into that a little later, but yeah, this is a beautifully written book. I love it. I also read The Keeper of the Gate by William Miekle, and these are 3 Lovecraftian short stories, and they were just so much fun. I went and immediately bought more of his, I think he calls them like a chapbook series, and I forget what, I think it was like number 5 or 6, The Keeper of the Gate is, of these Chapman books, and they're pretty cheap. If you want to check out, if you've never read William Miekle, he writes a lot. I mean, he writes a lot. He's sort of like Hunter Shea and Tim Curran, in that they all like writing about monster stories, and they're also all very prolific. So those are 3 authors that if you like monster fiction and you don't know who they are, you need to fix that, because they will blow you away. But William Miekle, he Keeper of the Gate, 3 Lovecraftian stories. They're just a lot of fun to read. The first story was like a police procedural, And, it was the weaker of the three. It was still good, though. I really enjoyed it. The second story was like a weird science fiction, far future type thing where the sun has become too small to sustain life on the top of the Earth. In fact, the whole Earth itself is covered in a thick crust of ice. And they have to use a ship to fly out onto the surface, and they go looking for ore. And I'm going to leave it at that because it's a pretty short story, and there's like a lot of really interesting things happening. It's kind of one of those stories you wish the author would expand upon, because the world itself is just, it's fascinating. And it's possible he did, but there is a Lovecraftian sort of cosmic horror bent to that story. But just the whole thing, actually, from beginning to end of that short story, was just mind-blowing in my opinion. And the last story, I really enjoyed as well. I should have probably wrote down a note, because this one he has serialized. I think the main character's name is Derek. I can't remember, but it's like a PI story, a private eye. Your typical private eye story. The one thing I really enjoyed about this story, and one thing I enjoy about William, why can't I say William today? William Miekle's characters, he often comes back to the beer guzzling, smoking, grumpy type of character, and his main character, his investigator, his PI, is that character. And I absolutely love following these types of characters that he writes, because either you can write them and get them wrong, or you can write them and get them right, and William Miekle gets them right. And also lately I've been itching to get back into reading some fantasy. I finished The Wheel of Time way back in March, I think. March or April, somewhere around there. And I was going to go right into another series of fantasy, but I didn't. Because, other books were calling. And so I find that I am a seasonal reader, except that my seasonal reading doesn't necessarily go with the actual season. It doesn't actually correspond with the season we're in. I find that my seasonal reading is more from like late summer to Christmas, is generally solidly horror with some mystery and whatnot. From Christmas to springtime is generally fantasy and weird fiction. And the summertime can be up in the air, but mostly it's horror too, or science fiction. But the fantasy is really big in the wintertime. And I think this is actually more of a, maybe it's a nostalgia thing, because that's how I used to read fantasy when I was younger. I used to read it in the winter. I don't know why, but I did. Maybe because I found it comforting, during the dark season. That is highly possible. So, I don't know, but I've been really wanting to read some fantasy. The only problem with that is choosing which fantasy to read, because there's so many series. And to be honest with you, I'm probably in the middle of a couple series that I could finish. But I'm not going to be jumping into any fantasy yet, because I want to finish off the rest of the year. I still don't really have too much of a TBR for the rest of the year, although I do have a couple of books that I am going to be reading with Rachel from the Shades of Orange and her Patreon group on Discord. We're reading Krampus by Brom over the month of December, and we're also reading Ghost Story by Peter Straub. And I believe Krampus is sort of like the bonus book, because it tied in the polls that Rachel posted. And also I've been wanting. Ghost Story is one of those guilty books that I haven't read. I should have read by now. I have read Peter Straub. I've read 3, maybe 4 of his books, but I haven't read Ghost Story, and there's a good reason for that. At least I think it's a good reason, is that it's like 700 pages, and B, the print in every book, up until ebook, was atrocious. I hated the print. It just it hurts my eyes. I know that publishers are looking to cut costs, but do they really have to sacrifice our eyes? But yeah, so You could also criticize me, though, because it's been available as an ebook for a long time now, and I still haven't got to it. But I'm getting to it now, so thanks to Rachel for that. Alright, I think I've rambled on long enough about books and writing, so that was From the Hip, number 3. Thank you for watching, and if you made it this long, you're my favorite person in the whole world. So please hit the like, please subscribe, comment, and we'll discuss some books. Keep being creative, and keep being safe. I'll talk to you guys in the next books video.